Long ago, in an ancient and forgotten age, an Italian plumber by the name of Mario went off on a journey to save the princess from the evil Koopa Troop. Then he did it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Super Mario Bros. Recently hit its 40-year anniversary! In other news, yes, Dad, your senior citizen card is available for pickup. It's time to get that close-up parking at Walmart to have a strange attraction to prune juice, and to watch your posterity play the new Super Mario game and tell them that when you played Mario,
The life count meant something, dang it. And more than 5 colors on the screen was a luxury, not a right.
But for everyone else watching this video, you're likely not over 40 years old. If you are, hey, thanks for tuning in. We respect your wisdom when we got some complimentary prune juice for you. But many of you have likely not played each of the Super Mario games on the NES, so you've probably played at least one, and even if you haven't, you can look at the screenshot and say, yeah, I know who that is.
But I thought it'd be fun to revisit the classics. Do they still hold up? Where do series staples like the Bullet Bill and the Chain Chomp come from? Well, let's answer those questions and more by diving into Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3. Hop on in.
Oh, yeah, disclaimer, I played through each of these games warpless. For those who aren't aware, each of these games has either some secret level endings or certain items that allow players to skip at least a couple worlds to get to the ending of the game faster. While I do often use these while replaying the likes of the original and 3, I'll be refraining from that to play through most or all of each of the game's levels to get a more comprehensive view. And that's enough rambling. Let me take it back to the 80s. Often credited as the savior of the North American gaming industry, so humbly referred to by Nintendo as Mr. Video Game himself, Mario has been the star of a few games, notably as Jumpman in the arcade hit Donkey Kong and later as the headliner of Mario Bros., where Luigi would first be introduced. But it was here, on Nintendo's first major video game console, where Mario invades your home and drags you on a journey across 32 epic obstacle course landscapes, stomping Koopas and kicking Goombas. Wait a second. For real though, the game is solid. The movement, especially compared to more modern Mario games, does feel a bit weird, but after a couple levels I got the hang of it pretty easily. You got 8 worlds, with 4 levels each, with the goal being to simply get to the flagpole at the end to move on. Worlds 1 and 2 are super simple, just giving you small little obstacles, pits, and introducing you to a few different level themes with above ground, below ground, underwater, in the sky, and the 4th level in each world being a lava-filled castle where you beat down a Bowser imposter. The next few worlds each introduce 1 or 2 new elements for you to master, with World 3 having bridges and jumping Cheep Cheeps, Lakitu showing up in most of World 4, Bullet Bills introduced in World 5, and finally Worlds 6, 7, and 8 take all these new elements, add Buzzy Beetles, and test how well you've mastered each of the enemies and hazards when mixed together. Some funny story from the editing table over here. I found out that I did not have a lot of footage of Worlds 3 through 6, and so I was kind of replaying a bit of that, just getting some footage, to actually show that there are indeed Bullet Bills and Lakitus and the Cheat Sheet bridges. There's no Cheat Sheets in World 3. I don't know entirely where I got that idea from, but there are no flying Cheap Cheeps in World 3. There are Lakitus in World 4, and there are Bullet Bills in World 5, but World 3 is it's pretty basic too, so apologies for that. Just so you're aware, FYI, I was a bit stupid. Anyways, the background for most of the worlds is also slightly changed up every now and then. The wonders of technology. There's also a hard mode that you can play after beating the game, the main addition being replacing all the easily killable Goombas with the fireproof Buzzy Beetles. A few points of interest for those looking for origins to specific themes and mechanics in later games. Well, the whole game concept is a start since this is the first one, but aside from that, you got the Fire Flower. Power that is returned for almost every single entry in the series. The whole concept is secret exits that can take you into farther worlds, as well as many of the castles having repeated hallway sections, where you have to pass through certain checks in these gaps to progress the level, which otherwise repeats endlessly. It feels like the worst age part of the game by far, and it makes sense that it's something that they've rarely brought back in later games, and if so, made it far easier, with one exception. Overall, the game is still solid, and still holds up, but is also clearly outdated.
While laying a great framework, the original Super Mario Bros. Feels just a bit outdated compared to everything else. And in all honesty, I think that's perfectly okay. I mean, there's not many series that can claim that their first game is the worst in the series. And if they can, then that means that literally every game since has built upon and improved ever since their genesis. So overall, that's probably a good thing that Super Mario Brothers is the worst game in the series.
But, you know how I just mentioned that most of these games were made easier since? Well, there is one major exception, and let's talk about that right now. The Lost Levels, Mario 2, A Punch to the Gut, whatever you want to call it, released the year after the original game.
These companies just can't stop with these asset reusing sequels, can they? Makes me sick.
The Lost Levels introduced concepts like the letters having shadows.
Ooh.
And a mushroom that wants you dead.
Ah.
Apparently, when making this game, Miyamoto and all of his little friends at Nintendo decided that this game was too hard for us numbskulls in the West, which is insulting.
It doesn't mean he's wrong, I just find it insulting.
But this game is intentionally harder. It was even marketed as such in Japan. I noticed the difficulty spike pretty easily, where I got my first game over in the original game in World 5, in Lost Levels I game overed in World 2. The layout of levels is basically the same, the difficulty is just expanded compared to the original, with harder jumps sometimes requiring you to time jumps off of enemies, more repeating hallways from the original game, and some levels only beatable if you find the hidden blocks creating a pathway for you. Ranging from challenging to unfair, difficulty is the Lost Levels' main shtick these days. The game will also prey on masters of the original game that figure out that game's secrets, with some of the secret warp zones returning, but with some of them also forcing you to go backwards in worlds, either forcing you to wait to time out and lose a life, or to go back a world or two to get back to where you were. There were some compensations for this difficulty, however. In the original game, if you ran out of lives, you could start on the world that you had died on by holding A when pressing start to begin a new game. In Lost Levels, the game doesn't rely on you knowing a secret button input, and that option is blatantly presented to you instead, making it a bit easier to jump back into near where you had lost with a better idea of how to navigate those levels. This is also the game that introduced Luigi's unique physics of higher jumps but worse traction, as well as allowing him to be playable in single-player mode, providing an alternative playstyle that could theoretically be a benefit if your jumps weren't doing great. Also, some elements that I found pretty interesting but have rarely, if ever, returned are these super springs that throw you violently into the sky, and you have to keep track of your movement with the D-pad to make sure that Mario doesn't plummet into a pit or an enemy who's landing. There's also wind in some of these levels, which will slowly push you forward, will boost your forward momentum, and limit your backwards momentum. Despite its challenge, one of my favorite levels from this game is probably the level that combines the super springs and the wind, where it essentially becomes a guessing game if you'll safely land unless you got a really good feel on where Mario is in the sky. The other major addition that has rarely been brought back is of course the poison mushroom. A moment to salute all of those who were deceived when they first tried to get that mushroom, and another salute to all those out there with colorblindness that will destroy this concept of trickery for them. Due to this game being very similar to the original, at least in terms of assets that are used, there's not much uniquely introduced here that's found its way into later entries, except for the concept of bonus worlds. Yes, they did get their official start here. The first ever Mario's World 9 is accessed by playing through every single level of the first 8 worlds consecutively. Essentially, this boils down to doing a warpless run. Introduced as a fantasy world, World 9 is based on glitched levels that could be accessed in the original game, often referred to the community as minus worlds. It's so heavily based on that concept that World 9 will actually endlessly loop in on itself after beating it, just like the levels found in Minus World. To my knowledge, it's also the first time Nintendo staff included a written thank you at the end of the secret world as well. There's not just World 9. For more traditional worlds, Worlds A, B, C, and D can be accessed after beating the main game 8 different times. No thanks.
Look, I don't mind a lot of lost levels, but there's just so much that's still difficult, tough as nails hard, almost Kaizo-like, with a bunch of hidden blocks and mechanics that just take a long time to figure out. I don't think I could ever beat this game 8 times just to see Worlds A through D. And as a whole, the game is still fairly fun, but a lot like the original, there's really only one reason to come back to it outside of novelty, and that's just because it's harder than most other Mario games that we have today. Again, if that's something that you're looking for, this game is perfect for you. But as a whole, it doesn't represent the series very well, and while, again, similar to the original, a good foundation, there are just so many things that later games do so much better that difficulty is really the only reason I could see you coming back to it outside of novelty.
Super Mario USA, Mario 2, Doki Doki Panic, whatever you want to call it, was what we got in the West instead of what we would later know as the Lost Levels. This game's got a really weird history, to say the least. This first part I saw with a lot of people referencing but couldn't find an official source for, so take it with a grain of salt. But what would later become Doki Doki Panic was originally designed as a concept to test out mechanics for a new Mario game. That prototype eventually became Doki Doki Panic, which, and this is where facts get much more verifiable, was reskinned as an official Mario game and was given to audiences outside of Japan, with Nintendo deciding that the original Mario 2 would be too difficult for worldwide audiences. As you can imagine, a Mario game changed to not be a Mario game and then later changed back into a Mario game would look a bit different compared to how the original game and its Japan-locked sequel would. First off, Mario looks like this now, and Luigi actually looks different outside of it being a palette swap. And Toad is blue, and Peach is a brunette. Oh, sorry, Toad is cool. Hey, wait a second, this is a character select screen. Looks like Japan's Mario 2 got the short end of the stick. All they got is an evil mushroom and Luigi physics. We got Luigi physics, Toad physics, Princess physics, and whatever the heck that is. Yeah, each character has their own playstyle. Mario is the traditional, rounded experience you've come to know and love. Luigi retains his physics from the lost levels. Toad is the fastest but can't jump to save his life, and Peach isn't very fast but can hover for a time. Everyone can also pick up things like plants and enemies like whatever the heck that is, and throw them to defeat other enemies. When holding down, you can also eventually pull off a super jump. You also have fixed hit points in this game instead of your remaining hits just being tied to if you've got a power up or not. These can also be increased by finding mushrooms in these strange potion doors. You can find some coins here too, but enough about mechanics. What is the lore behind all this? Surprisingly, there actually is a small bit of lore.
When Mario opened a door, after climbing a long stair in his dream, another world spread before him, and he heard a voice call for help to be freed from a spell. After awakening, Mario went to a cave nearby, and to his surprise, he saw exactly what he saw in his dream.
Well, let's add the gift of prophecy to Mario's skill set, I guess.
I don't know.
I guess a description of another world would explain why this place looks so different from the original game. As if this place wasn't weird enough already. Well, if another world is the excuse we need for vertical scrolling, yeah, vertical levels. Behold, innovation. Oh, and look who's at the end of level 1. Birdo! It's been a while. Do you want to come to the next Mario Party? I'll take that as a maybe. Birdo actually shows up as a mini-boss on a lot of this game's levels. Pick up her eggs, return to sender, digest the strange ball, and then become digested yourself by the Bird of Destiny. After that, you get to go gambling with any of the coins you found in level for a chance at an extra life. Yet even more evidence why I should never go to Vegas. Going through the levels here, you can already see the influence that would go on into the later titles. Even at the second-ish game in the series, the levels are already getting exploration and puzzle mechanics. A big standout to me learning how to time these bombs right. And speaking of which, we got to use them in our first boss fight. Mario 2 also innovates with having more unique boss battles, which have changed from avoiding Bowser to snag the axe to how many times can you throw things before dying. Sometimes bombs, sometimes mushroom blocks, and only sometimes repeat encounters, all the way through our 7 worlds. Wait, 7? Yeah, Mario 2 spits on the face of what you call Mario tradition. Save the princess, you are the princess! Bowser, who's Bowser? Here's Wart, the evil King Frog who hates vegetables so much he's taken up residence in the same room as the vegetable dispenser. Yeah, kind of a stupid move on your part, buddy. With that, you free these guys, called Subcon by the credits, and oh, the whole game was just a dream. Well, scratch to get the prophecy, Mario just has really cool dreams. Despite Super Mario Bros. 2 often feeling like the odd one out between all the NES games, I found it surprising how many parts of it have come back in some shape or form. POW blocks, whatever the heck that is, snippets, ninjas, and most notably Bob-Ombs and Birdo. Phanto is also a rare callback that I like seeing whenever it shows up. Overall, I like seeing how Nintendo is willing to experiment with their big franchises like Mario even early in the day. And it's some of that wacky experimentation that we're seeing again after a blander era during a good chunk of the 2010s. Nintendo could have easily just given us an easier version of the Lost Levels in the West and called it a day. But they were willing to take what that had been originally a scratch Mario game and give it a chance at the series it was originally intended for. A lot of the reasoning to come back to 2 USA is similar to the original game and 2 Japan, simply for the novelty of seeing Mario's origins, but there's enough of Mario 2 that hasn't been adapted or brought back for later releases that it does have more reason to check it out. But seriously, if you can break Birdo out of the dream dimension to play tennis, let my boy Ward out too. He's still in the corner of Mario's subconscious choking on vegetables for all we know.
Well, with how much they've added to character physics and sprites in Mario 2. I'm excited to see what they did in Mario 3. We truly have regressed as a society.
Luckily, they upped the scale and literally everything else to compensate for the lack of Toad gameplay. Starting off, well, thank goodness, after 3 other games, I was starting to want more context to where I was. The world map adds another layer to the traditional platforming experience. Whereas the only way to skip levels before was to find a warp zone to throw you farther into the game, the world map literally offers you branching paths a good chunk of the time, providing alternative ways to get to the next boss or giving you the option of clearing the additional levels to access Toad houses and get power-ups. Yes, Toad has been demoted to NPC, but now hosts Toad houses, which will give you a free power for later, as well as these card places where you'll be invited to play matching games for free acts of necromancy. All of these items show up in your item storage, accessed by pressing B on your world map. Music boxes will put map enemies to sleep so you can sneak right past them. Clouds will allow you to skip one level of your choice with a few exceptions. And the hammer allows you to break down parts of the world map, which can be done in a few places to grant access to more levels and Toad houses. Warp whistles allow you to skip the warp whistles allow you to visit the warp zone to skip a few worlds. Obviously, we'll be abstaining from this as per the rules I've set for myself. The anchor is an interesting one. Aside from the warp whistle, it's the rarest item you can obtain in the game. It's so rare that I never found it, and will cause an airship to get stuck wherever it is once you use it. This is a really cool aspect of Mario 3 that I wish would be brought back for future games. We've never really seen inventory items that do things specifically on the world map. The most we've really seen since is paying Poplins to break down block paths in Mario Wonder. But power-ups? We haven't even talked power-ups. Well, obviously we're familiar with the mushroom, and the fire flower, and the superstar, and that's all we're familiar with. Oh boy, we about to blow the lid off this thing. Mario 3 exploded in the amount of power-ups found in a single game. The most common addition is the Super Leaf. Mario gets this silly little tail that we can whack at silly little enemies, and it gives them the silly little power of flight. A new mechanic in this game is the P meter, which will begin filling up as Mario continuously runs. Once it's full, Mario's jump will become much more boosted, but when he has the silly little tail, Mario can just fly around for a limited time. The Super Leaf also some rarer variants in the game. The P-Wing is an item that's most often gifted to you after beating a world. In the first level you use it on, it keeps your P meter full the entire time, allowing you to basically cheese an entire level as long as there's no ceiling to stop you. It becomes a regular Super Leaf after the level is finished. The Tanuki suit functions much like a Super Leaf as well, though you can also activate a statue for a few seconds, which basically makes you invulnerable as long as you don't plummet into a pit or lava. Hate this game's water levels? Well, the frog suit will help make those levels way more manageable, at the cost of making most other levels in the game control like crap while you're wearing it. And have you ever dreaded dealing with Hammer Brothers? Well, become your enemies and exact revenge with the Hammer suit. All of the suit power-ups are rare, often only found in secret areas or Toad houses, but pack a solid punch to help you through tough levels. And speaking of which, we barely even talked about levels. The best way to describe Mario 3 levels is that they took the Mario 1 levels and kept innovating and added a few aspects from the Mario 2 USA levels, most notably vertical scrolling. There's some new concepts in here as well, including the official introduction of the auto-scroller. Oh boy. Much like Mario 2, each of the worlds has more distinct themes that are made even more apparent here thanks to the world map. World 1 is Grassland, World 2 is Desertland, World 3 is Waterland, World 4 is Giantland, World 5 is Skyland, World 6 is Iceland, World 7 is Pipeland, and World 8 is Darkland, with the secret World 9 being used as a warp zone. You got your standard levels, the enemy showdowns, and Toad House as mentioned earlier. A few levels stood out to me. Levels with the Angry Sun. I especially really liked this level in World 7 where you stand on these blocks which change trajectory based on when you jump. It was also in World 7 that there's a lot more puzzle levels introduced, where you can't just run through a level and have to do a bit more jumping and investigating to find things like secret blocks. It was also, yet again in World 7, where my brother walked in while I was on the world map and remarked that Mario was doing the 6-7. I have been cursed with this information, and now so are you. There's also long-time staple enemies that make their debut in this game, including Spike, Chain Chomp, and these evil munchers that even have their frozen block form that would become the bane of my childhood when I played 9-7 of New Super Wii. On top of these levels, you'll usually have a fortress or two where you'll fight Boom Boom, where we see the beginning of a tried and true method of stomping on the head 3 times to win. Boom Boom reappears constantly in these fortresses, and will every now and then add a new mechanic like the power of flight and a sudden rush towards Mario. But once you know the pattern, these are very easy. At the end of each world is also a castle, but Nintendo has evolved as a game development company. You don't fight Bowser here. You don't fight anything here. Instead, interacting with each of these castles will unlock the airship in each world, where one of 7 Koopalings is lurking with the wand they stole from the respective land's king. Yes, the Koopalings Genesis. Larry, Lemmy, Iggy, Morton, Roy, Wendy, and Ludwig. Interestingly, Morton's legal government name has been listed as Morton Koopa Jr., implying that somewhere out there is more terrifying, destructive Morton Koopa Sr. They've got a lot of small gimmick tied around them, though a good chunk of them are shared in their first appearance. Morton, Roy, and Ludwig will all shake the ground when they land, which paralyzes Mario for a few seconds. Out of those three, Ludwig is the fastest, making him the hardest to defeat. Larry and Iggy are the most basic out of the 7 here, mainly just shooting out projectiles and jumping around. The most unique ones are Wendy and Lemmy. Wendy will shoot out ricocheting projectiles as opposed to the others that just go through walls and eventually leave the arena. Lemmy likewise shoots out bouncing balls instead of the typical projectile. These are all more solid than the Boom Boom fights, but what really makes the airships unique in this game specifically is if Mario loses a life on the airship. It will move to a different part of the map and you have to go hunt it down and to try again. This is where the anchor would be a useful item, just as rare as it is. Depending on how much of the world you cleared before attempting the airship, this could potentially mean you have to clear more levels before being able to take another stab at the airship. It's a fun concept to try out, though I understand why it's something they decided to not bring back in future games, that even with this game have begun to be catered even more towards a more widespread audience in terms of age and skill. You can feel it. Even though this game can still be more difficult at a few points, it's not quite as hard as the original and the Western 2. And especially not as hard as the grind that is Lost Levels. The hardest the game gets is at World 8. With the many auto-scrollers, this airship level in particular would definitely have been a roadblock for a younger me, but again is much easier than the hardest aspects of any of this game's predecessors. The Bowser fight was ironically one of the easiest boss fights I had of the game, maybe aside from the Boom Boom encounters I had after facing him for about the 5th time. Bowser will breathe a few fireballs and then throw all of his weight where Mario currently is. By moving out of the way and planning your positioning, you can get Bowser to fall through the floor and into the abyss, winning the game. It really is interesting to see how much of the Mario formula of today relies back on what was established in this game in particular. Yes, Mario 3 also built off of the 3D games that came before it, but also innovated and added so much that we consider part of the core Mario experience, specifically the world map and Toad houses. And let's not forget the more accessibility and all ages friendly approach that this game started in terms of level design. Yes, the newer games are, as a whole, are easier, but even Mario 3 feels so much more accessible in terms of physics, power-ups, and level design than 1 and both versions of 2. So, after looking at all 4 of these games, is there merit in going back and playing them? I would argue yes, especially if you're fond of platforming games. These games have the blueprint for not just Mario, but so many other series that have taken inspiration for their own games. Even if only for the novelty of seeing the origin of one of the most popular video game series of all time, checking out Super Mario Bros., The Lost Levels 2 and 3, I would consider worth your time.
And you might say, okay Josh, that's all well and good, but out of these 4, which one is the best? It's 3, it's not even close. The amount of just expansiveness, power-ups, movements, the world map is such a huge part of what Mario games are like today. It is honestly a surprise that this is the game it came from. I would have expected it to come from another game, but no, it's with 3. Compared to the more modern games that we have today, the original and both versions of Mario 2 feel more like proofs of concept, whereas Mario 3 feels like an actual game. An earlier game from an earlier time, yes, but it feels like a full game. And I can see why a lot of people consider it to be their favorite 3D Mario game. And it's something that I just didn't kind of stick with until I came over and I looked at it with a critical eye instead of just kind of playing through it as the idea is like, hey, this is early Mario. But no, I get it now. I get why people believe that this is the best 3D Mario. So yeah, all in all, Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 2, and Super Mario Bros. 3 all still hold up fairly well. 3 is obviously the most expansive experience, probably the most fun playing it, but all of the other 3 are still fairly easy to jump into, whereas Lost Levels is still difficult. You can still grasp the mechanics fairly quickly, and it's games that I would recommend playing today if you've never taken the time to go and do so. But that's enough of me rambling. If you want to play these games for yourself, that's up to you. So, I'm Josh, and you've been watching my show. Thanks for stopping by. Keep rocking.